I am told we are at the bottom of page 174. I know that last week we ended with the tiger story. I remember that. In the doctor's nightmare so far, we've seen how Dr. Bob grew up. We saw that he came from a family that had a lot of religious participation, training, church, all of that. We saw that he consciously rejected that way of life to live a life of self-will, okay? He started drinking, soon developed the allergy. We see the progression of alcoholism in Dr. Bob's life. We see how it affected his education. We see how it affected his family. We've seen how it affected his health. We've seen the mental obsession, right? We've seen Dr. Bob stop drinking, remember, so he could get out of college, right? So he gets out of college, starts drinking again, and then he gets an internship. And so he has this internship. He stays busy at the hospital. He goes 2 years just busying himself with work. And in the paragraph we had right before we stopped last week, he says, when those 2 years were up, I opened an office downtown. This is second to the last paragraph on page 174. I had some money, all the time in the world, and considerable stomach trouble. Now, I want you to stop and think about this for a minute. He says he has stomach trouble. Now, what would a normal person who has stomach trouble, now mind you, this is a doctor. What would a normal person who had stomach trouble, what would they do? They would probably, especially at this time, they would take bromides. They would take bromides, like what today would be Alka-Seltzer. That would be that kind of thing. Here's Dr. Bob's solution to his stomach trouble. Let's take a look at this. I soon discovered that a couple of drinks would alleviate my gastric distress. Oh my God, a miracle cure, a drink. Is everybody following this?
What page?
We're talking about the mental obsession to drink. Many of us, especially early on, and it will vary from person to person, are able to quit for some time, but we can't stay quit. It's always some insane thought that takes us back to it, no matter what the length of time is. And what we're going to see with him, and I think it works this way with me and with most people that I've worked with, as time goes on, the times you can stay stopped get shorter. It's progressive. So, after 2 years, he has this brilliant thought, I got stomach trouble, drinking will fix it, right? So he starts again. And then it goes on to say, so it was not at all difficult for me to return to my former excessive indulgence. And that was the reason that we went through the tiger story last week. Because when you pick back up, you don't start where you left off. You start where you would have been had you never stopped. If you don't understand that, and I did the tiger story last week, and I'm not going to do it again today, talk to somebody and ask them, did you start where you left off? It is not possible. Your body is aging, your metabolism is slowing, therefore your ability to metabolize alcohol lessens over time. When I first came in the program, my first sponsor used to make me go to Rosary Hall when these 30-some-year-old people in Cleveland, with 30-year sober people, would get drunk. And I would say to him, I don't know them, and Cleveland's an hour away. And he'd say, shut up and do what I told you. So I would get in the car, go to Cleveland, go to Rosary Hall, and sit next to some guy who got drunk with 38 years or 42 years, and I would ask him what happened they would tell me all of the things that they stopped doing, how step by step they gave their sobriety back, right? And I got to see with my own two eyes what somebody who was sober over 30 years looked like after 2 weeks of drinking. Not 2 months of drinking, not 2 years of drinking. 2 weeks of drinking cannot hold a spoon. I spoon-fed Jell-O to some of these guys. You do not start where you left off. That's not possible. Time doesn't go backward. You will pick up where you would have been had you never stopped. Okay? So that's where Dr. Bob is at this point. We're going to see more of this as we see the progression. For all the new people who are listening to me tonight, the same way we do Bill's story, this is step one stuff. This is step one stuff. Allergy, obsession, and what I'm going to ask you to do, the same as we do when we start your book and go through it, is to look at the information not as Dr. Bob's nightmare, but look at it from the light of your own experience and ask yourself, did I drink like he drank? Did I think like he thought? Did I feel like he felt? Did I do what he did? And you'll start getting ding, ding, ding. We call that identification in here. We're getting ready to take the first step and to fully conceive to our innermost self that we're alcoholic. When I fully conceive to my innermost self that I'm an alcoholic, I do not do that based on your experience. I do it based on my own personal experience as it relates to the information in the book and the sharing of other people's experience. But I have to look at it from the light of my own experience. I can't catch alcoholism from your experience. Does everybody understand what I'm saying? Right. Okay, so we look at it from the light of our own experience. Did I do that? Did that happen to me? You will be amazed at how this thing will work, right? You got alcoholism. All right. Let's get back. Now, we'll pick up at the bottom of 174. By this time, I was beginning to pay very dearly physically. Do you remember? Now we see the physical progression continuing for Dr. Bob. It started out with some jitters, then some really bad shakes and jitters. Now he's talking about his physical condition more. I asked this question last week. How many people listening to me right now in this room and across the country, how many people listening to me had physical consequences as a result of this disease, right? Many of us. I know I did severely, right? The human body is not made out of cast iron. It was not meant to consume copious amounts of poison on a daily basis and remain healthy. If you drink enough, you will begin to destroy yourself physically. We don't think about that when we're drinking, right? Because alcohol is an answer for a guy like me. It ain't a problem until I walk into a doctor's office and they tell me, looks like you may be needing another liver and you're 30 years old. Okay. Let's continue.
Hopefully change your thinking.
And in hope of relief, voluntarily incarcerated myself, listen to this, at least a dozen times in one of the local sanitariums. So what's he trying to do?
Rehab.
What's he trying to do? He's trying to put himself someplace to stop this. So he's voluntarily, how many people listening to me right now have voluntarily placed yourself in a sanitarium? Oh, we don't call them sanitariums no more. We call them treatment centers. Raise your hand if you have voluntarily placed. Yeah, quite a few in here, right? And why did you do that? You wouldn't do that if you didn't have a problem, would you? Right? You wouldn't do that if you didn't have a problem. So a dozen times, not 2 or 3, a dozen times, this guy placed himself in a sanitarium. Let's continue and see what happened.
I have 30 times down here.
I was between Scylla and Charybdis. And what between Scylla and Charybdis means, that's Greek. It's having to choose between two evils. Some of us today call it a rock and a hard place, okay? Having to choose between a rock and a hard place. having to choose between two evils. So let's take a look at the two evils he's got to choose from. Because if I did not drink, my stomach tortured me. And if I did, my nerves did the same. After 3 years of this, right? Drinking for his stomach and then paying with his nerves, I wound up in the local hospital where they attempted to help me. But I would get my friends to smuggle me a quart. Or I would steal the alcohol about the building so that I got rapidly worse. How many people listening to me right now have got loaded in the process of trying to get some help? Even if you wasn't in a residential setting, if you was in an outpatient program, if you was trying to come to meetings to get better, how many people listening to me when physically, right, trying to get some help, still picked up? You're looking at a guy, been in the hospital several times, was loaded every time. Had the fellas smuggling it up there, right? Died one time, and 2 hours out the cardiac unit, beamed me up, Scotty and chugging tall boys, right? 2 hours out the cardiac unit, right? Well, you would think to yourself, well, after that, whoa, how could you pick up what? See, this is why only people like us understand people like us. You know, when I got sober, I said to one of my cousins, I had enough. She looked at me and she said, you should have been had enough. You done been dead 2 or 3 times, right? Well, you know. Here's the deal. I didn't have the power not to. I did not have the, see, I need to understand that recovery from alcoholism is not a matter of choice. If I could choose not to drink or not drink, I don't need AA. This is not a matter of personal choice. The only choice I have in here is God is everything or else he is nothing. That's the choice I got in here. And to do what people who recover in this program do. Real simple, isn't it? Get a sponsor, get in the book and the steps, get a home group, get some kind of service commitment at that group, and stick your hand out and share what you have with the next person who comes behind you. I've never seen a person do those things and pick up while they're doing them. Now, I've seen people stop doing them and pick up. I've never seen anybody who's actively doing those things pick up. So if you're listening to me tonight, this is not some kind of crapshoot. This is not some kind of throw a dart at the wall and hope it sticks. This is 100% guaranteed to work. I've been here for a good while. I sat at a table years ago with 4 men over 50 years sober, over 200 years of sobriety, 4 guys. And I said, have you ever seen anybody do those things and it failed? And all 4 of them said the exact same thing. Absolutely not. Never. Never. So if I'm new here, right, there it is. This is not a lightning strike per chance that we get sober. I can take these things, right? And how do you know that? Come into meetings and watch. Listen. You'll hear it every day. You'll see it right in front of you. You'll see the people who are doing well, and you'll see the people who are not doing well in here. Right? So what's it going to be? What's it going to be? Right? Let's continue. Finally, my father had to send the doctor out from my hometown.
That's right, because when I was for Boston,
right? His father already had to come out there once. The guys in the fraternity, remember when they had to call his father to come out there and work? You know, so now let's go back to the family. Let's suck them back into this thing, right? Finally, my father had to send a doctor out from my hometown who managed to get me back there in some way. And I was in bed about 2 months before I could venture out of the house. Now, this is still a relatively young man. still a relatively young man. 2 months in the bed before he can get out of the house. Let's continue. I stayed about town a couple of months more and then returned to resume my practice. I think I must have been thoroughly scared by what happened, or by the doctor, or probably both, so that I did not touch a drink again until the country went dry. Would you write the word fear? We look at all the ways that we try to stay sober. We did the same thing in Bill's story, right? Self-knowledge, willpower, right? Intellect, right? Fear of consequences I might face. You remember when Bill said Armistice Day, he started drinking again. Fear sobered me for a bit, right? What did Bill do when fear sobered for a bit? He locked himself in the house, right? For 2 or 3 months. And then finally, Armistice Day, and he's back at it again, right? So Dr. Bob says here that he was thoroughly scared by what had happened. That's a dozen times in the sanitarium. That's his father having to come and send for him, having drank in the hospital. So he's scared, right? And scared by what happened and by what the doctor told him, probably both. So he says he went dry and didn't touch a drink again until the country went dry, okay? And what he's talking about is the beginning of prohibition, okay? So he stayed sober out of fear. How many people listening to me right now, because of consequences you've been facing, made a decision out of fear of those consequences coming into your life, losing your kids, losing your job, going to the joint, dying, whatever it was, losing your home? How many of you have made a decision based on those fears prior to coming here that I'm done with this crap? I'm done. How many people have done that and yet picked up again? Raise your hand. Boy, that's almost a whole room in here, right? I guess fear doesn't work, does it? Fear doesn't work. I tried it many a times. Bill used to say all the time, I never walked into the bar and said, give me a shot and a beer. I want to be in jail by 9 o'clock. I never wanted that stuff in my life. I never wanted. When the judge told me, if you in here one more time, I am going to send you somewhere, and this is a quote, where you will never again harm another man, woman, rock, dog, or tree. And that's exactly what that man told me. And I knew he was not playing. When Judge down here, when she told me, when she took her glasses off, which used to mean you're going to penitentiary, she took her glasses off and she said, I am through with you. One dirty urine, and you're going to do all 5 of this 3 to 5. I'm done. Did I think she was playing? No. And I said the same thing every time when I had the heart attack. I did in the cardiac. I'll never do it again. And if you'd have put a lie detector on me, the needle wouldn't have moved. I was not joking. I didn't want to die, go to prison, lose my job, or be homeless any more then than I do today. The fear ain't enough. She told me one dirty urine, you're going to prison. And that worked for about 4 days. I was driving across town. Actually, I was going to report. It was Friday morning, my first day to report. I had an hour before they opened the door, unlocked the door to adult probation downtown to Erie County Courthouse. I'm driving across town. Here's the thought that came to me. You know, they never test you on your first time reporting. They don't think anybody's that stupid. I really had that thought. You just got threatened. They know you ain't gonna cut. Shot right into the old Super Bowl tavern out there in the plaza. Cornelius knows the spots, right? Finger went up. 8-ounce water glass of old granddad came down. I staggered into adult probation an hour later. Staggered. With 5 years in prison hanging over my head. And I didn't do that because I'd rather be drunk than sober. I didn't do that because I'd rather be in prison than be free. I did it because I'm powerless over alcohol. Are we wrapping our head around this powerless thing? If you knew, stay with me.
Come on.
A thought so strong, it will override any thinking that I can raise as a defense against it. Fear don't work. Okay?
Hey.
Now, what Dr. Bob is about to do here should have landed him in a mental institution. Let's take a look at his next thinking. With the passing of the 18th Amendment, I felt quite safe. Now there ain't gonna be no liquor, so he can't drink, right? So he's feeling safe. Listen to this. I knew everyone would buy a few bottles of cases before all the liquor is gone. Of liquor as their checks permitted, and that it would soon be gone. Now, here's where he goes south. Therefore, now mind you, he ain't drink since the prohibition started, right? He stayed sober all this time up to now. This is his thinking. Therefore, it would make no great difference, even if I should do some drinking. After all, pretty soon it's all going to be gone. So, why not have something to drink? Did he say, I want you to stay with me for a minute if you knew. Did he say to himself, well, I need to remember I was in the sanitarium a dozen times. I was in the hospital. I drank in there. I'm physically dying here. Did he say that? Did he say, I've hurt everybody. I've lost all these opportunities. I was bedridden for 2 months in my parents' house back in Vermont. Did he bring up any of that? No. Here's his thought. Well, the liquor gonna be gone pretty soon anyway, so I might as well drink some. That's his thought. What I want you to understand is the power of obsession. Because when I would lay in the bed and I would think of all the reasons why I ain't gonna drink, when the thought of a drink came to me, and it was usually within the next half hour, there was no debate. I didn't stop and say, no, wait a minute. Half an hour ago, no. Boom, been like a radar, right? I'm only gonna have one. The liquor will soon be gone. It ain't gonna matter. Do you see how this thing works? Such is the power of obsession. It's almost like a mental eraser. If you list all this stuff, when the obsessive thought comes, it just wipes it all out. It just wipes it all out. I don't sit around and debate. The book said I can't bring into consciousness with sufficient force, and this is what it's talking about, the pain, suffering, and humiliation of days and weeks ago. We are without defense against the first drink. I can't bring that pain back. I can't bring that thinking back. I'm not going to do it. When the obsession comes, it's lights out. It's everybody following.
Yep.
So the purpose of the steps is what?
Change our thinking.
What is the purpose of the steps? What do the steps do?
Find God.
Somebody say it. Relieve the obsession. The physical can't change. Once the alcoholic, always the alcoholic. You take a drink tonight, you're going to pick up right where you would have been if you never stopped. There is no cure for the physical other than what Dr. Silkworth said. The only relief we have to suggest is entire abstinence. Well, how do I stay entirely abstinent when I got a mind that continues to take me back to the first drink? A spiritual awakening as a result of these steps. The purpose of the steps is to remove the obsession, not the physical. You don't have the phenomenon of craving by not taking the first drink. You don't take the first drink by the removal of the obsession through taking the steps. Is everybody with me on that? I hope so. Y'all been sitting with me for 18 months. Some of y'all are longer than that. Right? So there you go, right there. Simple, that's it, that's all. This is not calculus. It is not calculus. It's very, very simple. Okay? Let's continue. At that time, I was not aware of the almost unlimited supply the government made it possible for us doctors to obtain. Neither had I any knowledge of the bootlegger who soon appeared on the horizon. So he started drinking, thinking, well, you know, it's all going to run out, right? Where there is demand, there will be supply. A lot of y'all know that, don't you? I drank with moderation at first, but it took me only a relatively short time. Remember what we talked about, the tiger, to drift back into the old habits which had wound up so disastrously before. Right back rolling again, right? Right back rolling again. During the next few years, I developed two distinct phobias. One was the fear of not sleeping, and the other was the fear of running out of liquor. Now,
Yeah. I didn't run out.
self-centered fear
Pieces of that stuff.
is the chief activator of all of our defects. Fear, obviously, is at the root of all of this mess, isn't it? What is the opposite of fear? Faith. All right? So we want to go from living a fear-directed life and a fear-driven life to a faith-directed life. Now you're seeing how fear begins to manifest itself in terms of his mental condition. He starts talking about having phobias. Phobias. Okay? Starts talking about having phobias. Well, we sure look a mess mentally when we get in here, don't we? It's amazing the recuperative and regenerative power of these steps. Because most of us look anxious, panicky, depressed. I could be all of them in like 3 minutes, right? I can shift gears with them in about 3 minutes, right? But that's what we look like when we come in here. So Dr. Bob's condition, anybody that's listening to me right now suffering from phobias, unreasonable fears, anybody listening to me right now suffering from unreasonable fears? Common with newer people. Very common. Can't sleep at night, right? Jumpy, fidgety, can't rest. Stay with me.
Let's continue.
Not being a man of means, I knew that if I did not stay sober enough to earn money, I would run out of liquor.
There's a motivation.
Most of the time, therefore, I did not take the morning drink, which I craved so badly, but instead would fill up on large doses of sedatives to quiet the jitters, which distressed me terribly. So he had shakes, very bad shakes in the morning. We all know that the hair of the dog that bit you is what they tell you is the antidote for that, right? 19 years old, I had the shakes, and I started drinking in the morning. I told y'all that last week, 50 milliliter shots when I was in college. I stole beakers. 19 years old, I was drinking in the morning because of the shakes, right? Well, Dr. Bob knows he's a doctor. Not only is he a doctor, he's a surgeon. He knows he can't start drinking because if he start drinking, he ain't going to work. And if he don't go to work, he ain't got no money. If he ain't got no money, he can't drink. Is everybody following?
Yeah.
So instead of drinking in the morning, homeboy is eating pills to keep his nerves straight so he can make some money to get loaded at night so he could wake up in the morning shaking again to take the pill. Just how he lived.
Right.
Now,
Homeboy.
the point I want to make about this is how alcoholism is running every aspect of his life. Every aspect of his life. Do you see this? Here was a man who started out going to school, gonna be somebody, eventually going to medical school, ever progressing alcoholism though, right? All this stuff is going on. But he didn't start out, he started out just like everybody else does. And we talked about this, we talk about this stuff a lot. Like, you're sitting there right now, listening to me, wherever you at. What did you want to be? What did you want to do? And how did this disease change that? How did this change that? How did my life become entirely centered around alcoholism? See, looking back at it, see, like when it's happening, the alcoholic mind rationalizes every compromise that I make in my life. I don't need to go to college. I don't need to do this. I don't need to have that, right? It rationalizes. Most of the time, I'm some kind of victim. Other times, I convince myself that it's not something that I need or really want to do. Do you see how this thing takes and takes and takes? Mentally, physically, spiritually, just takes and takes and takes. I had a sponsee, Reggie, and we was riding in the car one day, and he said something to me. He used to say a lot of profound stuff, God rest his soul. But he said to me, hey, Cole, I was thinking today, I can't think of one single, solitary, lasting, enduring, positive thing that this disease brought into my life. Not one. So I challenge you. Look at your life. What positive, lasting, enduring, good thing has this added to your life? And I looked at him, and he wasn't sober that long in, and I looked at him and I said, that's deep. Because it's true. This thing is a taker. It is not a giver. It is a taker. It ruins lives. It ruins relationships. It ruins futures. It takes. But here's the crazy thing, and y'all know it's true. When I'm in the mix, I can't see that. I cannot see that. Crazy thing about this disease, you can't see what it does to you till you free of it.
That's right.
I can look in the rearview mirror and see that, but when I was towed up from the floor up and running around here half crazy, you could not have put a gun to my head and convinced me that this thing was a problem in my life. I could not see it. That's why the principle of the first step is honesty. That is why in this meeting, we spent so much time on step one. That's why I'm so glad that we do this at the end of the book. I'm ready to get to the traditions and all that and then get back to the beginning, because that's where the meat and potatoes that you don't get the first one, you can forget the next 11, because you ain't going to do them. Why would you? If I ain't powerless and I can manage my own life, I don't need God and I don't need you. Let's just get down to the truth. until I fully conceive to my innermost self that I'm alcoholic and I cannot manage my own life, I am sorry, but I ain't doing this. I am not doing it because it's going to ask me to do things that I'm going to believe I don't need to do. I don't need to write no inventory. I'll write yours. I ain't looking for no manager in my life. I'm the kid. No manager, right? Let's continue. Make amends. You can start making them to me whenever you get ready. Because I ain't wrong, right? Let's continue. Occasionally, I would yield to the morning craving, but if I did, it would be only a few hours before I would be quite unfit for work. This would lessen my chances of smuggling some home that evening, which in turn would mean a night of futile tossing around in bed, followed by a morning of unbearable jitters. So if he take the morning drink, that means he ain't gonna finish the work day. That means he gotta go home early. That means, and his wife is not letting him out the house. So now it's gonna be a long night, Jack. And it's gonna be a sloppy morning when you wake up, right? This is how the doctor is living. Let's continue. During the subsequent 15 years, I had sense enough never to go to the hospital if I had been drinking, and very seldom did I receive patients. I would sometimes hide out in one of the clubs of which I was a member, and had the habit at times of registering at a hotel under a fictitious name. Do you see how difficult, as this thing progresses, how difficult it is for him to shut it off? As it progresses, what? More and more and more is required. Let's continue. Okay. All right. But my friends usually found me, and I would go home if they promised that I should not be scolded. So his boys had to come find me, and then had to go talk to Ann and say, you know, he'll come home, but you know, you got to go easy. You know, look at what this is doing to the family. Look at this, what this is doing to his life.
Baseball bat.
Let's continue. If my wife was planning to go out in the afternoon, I would get a large supply of liquor and smuggle it home and hide it in the coal bin, the clothes chute, over door jambs, over beams in the cellar, and in cracks in the cellar tile. How many people in here have hid stashes? Right, I see a lot of hands down, a lot of hands up. Is the doctor doing anything different than what we do? That's what I love about it. This thing is timeless. Dr. Bob been dead since 1950. 1950, Dr. Bob died. Here we sit in 2019, did the same thing. The clothes changed, the cars changed, right? The technology changed, but alcoholics remain the same. He could come in here now and tell this story, and y'all's heads would be bobbing up and down, right? Because this is all stuff that we did. He's stashing his liquor in the house. Having the privilege of being on the board at Dr. Bob's home, and I have been an active volunteer at that house for over 25 years. I can tell you from personal experience that during renovations of that house, we have found enough bottles over the years to line this big wound that we sit in. They were everywhere, everywhere. I sometimes wonder, because we've done a complete restoration of the home, I sometimes wonder if there still ain't something around there. Doc was sneaky, right? But down in the coal bin, the laundry chute, if you come to Dr. Bob's home, we can show you all those things and all those places. But over the years, and some of those bottles we have on display there at the house, you can see them, ones that we found over the years. And we can date them back to the time they were in the house by the bottles themselves. So we know that they were his, right? So Dr. Bob, much like many of us, right, thinks he's sneaky. How many of y'all thought y'all was sneaky? You thought y'all was slick, right? That's what we do, right? That's what we do. Let's continue. I also made use of old trunks and chests, the old can container, and even the ash container. The water tank on the toilet I never used because that looked too easy. I found out later that my wife inspected it frequently. I used to put 8 or 12-ounce bottles of alcohol in a fur-lined glove and toss it onto the back airing porch when winter days got dark enough. My bootlegger had hidden alcohol at the back steps where I could get it at my convenience. Sometimes I would bring it in my pockets, but they were inspected, and that became too risky. I also used to pull it up in 4-ounce bottles,
I couldn't handle that.
put it up in 4-ounce bottles and stick several in my stocking tops. This worked nicely until my wife and I went to see Wallace Berry in Tugboat Annie, after which the pant leg and stocking racket were out. One of the things that Dr. Bob used to do, this is during Prohibition, if you got caught with alcohol, you went to prison. You went to prison, okay? If you got caught with cocaine during Prohibition, you got like a $5 fine. True, all right? So what do you do with all these empty bottles? Because obviously, should these empty bottles fall into the wrong hands, it could be big trouble. This is what the good doctor used to do. There was up the street from him 2 neighbors who was always feuding. Dr. Bob used to take empties down the street and put them in their waste cans. They accused each other of putting them in each other's waste cans, and it just kept their feud going. All the while, it was the doctor up the street who was doing it, right? That's one of the things that Dr. Bob used to do. That is a true story. Let's continue. I got to start by this. I will not take space to relate all my hospital or sanitarium experiences. Now, we knew that he went a dozen times, right, prior. And now he says, during this 15-year period, I am not even going to try to touch that. Dr. Bob had a wife and family. Need I say more? Let me ask you a question tonight. And I don't need a show of hands on this. If you've had multiple hospital visits and stays, if you've had multiple treatment episodes, if you've had unlimited detox, Who was waiting on you? Who was waiting on you? See, it's the reality of this thing. When the book said it engulfs all whose lives touch the sufferers, that means those close to you, and sometimes people that ain't even close to you, get to go along with you. How many people know or have families that when you got sober was sicker than you as a result of this disease in their life? I bet you a whole bunch of them. Families sicker than me when I got here. Neurotic, fearful, angry, isolated. When you laying up in detox, scheming on how to get high or another treatment, who's missing you? Who's missing you? See, a guy like me who only thinks about himself. What did Dr. Bob say earlier in this story? And I said it was the most descriptive line for me personally in the entire book. That I live my life without regard for the rights, wishes, or privileges of any other human being. A condition that worsened as time passed. That's how I live. I'm so full of me, I can't even see you. Much less worry about what you think or what's going on with you. Let's talk about the truth. La-di-da, la-di-da, it's all about me. Poor me, poor me. They got orange Jello in treatment. I like lime. That's the kind of thing that I got. Not only burning my life to the ground, but burning yours along with mine. So full of me, I can't see you. And then walking around here 6 months sober, wondering why everybody ain't jumping up and down and celebrating.
Yeah.
It's time to get real. This is what I know. If you listen to me tonight and your life is looking like that, and you wondering if this thing gonna work for you, this is what I can tell you. You 12 steps away from the answer. You 12 steps away from the answer.
12 steps away from what?
The answer.
During all this time, we became more or less ostracized by our friends. So now, into wives and the family afterward, we spent a great deal of time talking about the effect of this thing on the family, how it affects the alcoholic family in the same way. How many of us become isolated? How many of us feel alone, even in a room full of people this big? How many of us have felt alone with the family at holiday? How many of us have felt alone in a car full of people we've known all our lives? Don't nobody know me really, because I don't let you see me. I only let you see what I want you to see so that you will think of me what I want you to think of me, because what I think of me is based on what I think you think of me. Now, if you follow that, you can do it all right.
Got it. I understood that. Check.
I'm a chameleon. I got personalities I ain't even met yet. And I whip one out whenever it's necessary to be who I got to be to get the desired response from you. If I want you to be scared of me, then I'll bully you. If I want you to like me, then I'm going to schmooze you. Everybody around me has a purpose and a function. It is to serve Kent. It is to give me what I think I need from you. Selfish people don't love, they take. They use. So Dr. Bob makes the statement, my family has become ostracized. How many of you can look at your family and know the truth? They don't go where they used to go. They don't do what they used to do no more, right? They start lying for you, right? We bring all this crap into their lives and infect them with it until they're sicker than we are. I can tell you, in the home I grew up in, there was no hollering, screaming. There were no sleepless nights. There was no shame. There was no guilt until Kent picked up a drink. And I brought all of that and more into that house until they were sicker than I was. I'll never forget. Got into a altercation, and the police was called, and I was unjustly arrested. I maintain my innocence to this day. Anyway, I hit somebody with something, and they put me in jail. It was 2 or 3 o'clock in the morning. I called my father, and because of my history, they wanted a couple $1,000s for me to get out of there. And my father had to call a bail bondsman. And it's, I don't know, 3 o'clock in the morning when I finally get out. And I get in the car with my father. And he looked at me, and I'm a, this is what he told me. He said, next week, I'm going to go over to the credit union, and I'm going to get $4,000 or $5,000. I'm going to keep it at the house. So the next time this happens, I don't have to pay no bail bonds. That's how sick I made my father. That's how sick I made my father. So I ask you tonight, with all the things that we do and all the places that we end up, who's missing it? I will say this. We cannot stay sober for other people. It don't work. But I will say this. It's time for me to get honest and stop lying to myself, especially, and to other people, and saying I ain't hurt nobody and it's my life. That's the most damnable lie that people like us can tell. You know, they always say the truth will set you free. But the first thing I got to do is I got to get honest about what's going on. And I sit in these meetings and I hear this kind of sharing, like Dr. Bob is sharing with us now. And I see my life. And I see my life. And I can honestly say I did that. Doing the things I did, that was not my intention. Harming my family, that was never my intention. But I'm powerless over alcohol and my life is unmanageable. And if I don't get access to some power, this doesn't stop. We deep in the throes of step one in this story right now. Deep in the throes of step one. And I hope tonight you got to take a look at some things.
Powerful.
Because that's what we do here. Okay? All right, it's 9 o'clock. We're going to stop right